Hello, and welcome to the CivilTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Tassie Althouse. If you're new to the show, this is where we explore civility and social emotional learning with esteemed guests, expert insights, and practical advice to help people navigate the world. Today on the show, we're honored to welcome Dr. Riana Elyse Anderson, a licensed clinical psychologist who also serves as associate professor at Columbia University's School of Social Work with a PhD in clinical and community psychology from the University of Virginia and advanced training from Yale. Dr. Anderson brings both academic depth and real world passion to her work. Her research centers on how Black families experience and respond to racial discrimination and how intentional practices like racial socialization can reduce stress and support psychological well-being in youth. Through her company, Race Space Inc., and her leadership in developing family-based interventions, she's helping communities transform pain into power. Her commitment goes beyond research. She's a public scholar who actively shares her work through mentorship, media, policy, and community storytelling. She's also the recipient of more than 20 prestigious awards for her contributions to psychology and child development. We are so honored to have her with us today for a timely conversation on emotional intelligence, family healing, and civil leadership in today's world. Dr. Anderson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. We're so grateful to have you here. So, to start off, can you begin by sharing what first drew you to the intersection of psychology, race, and family dynamics?
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for having me. This is definitely a time where these conversations need to be had, and I love to go to the root of things to understand how we got to where we are and how we'll get even beyond that. So, it's a great question to kick off with. Like, why on earth would I do this to myself? Why would I set myself up for a career that was going to be challenging? And for me, it was using lived experience. So I'm from Detroit. If you're watching, you'll see this imported from Detroit shirt. You'll see all these Detroit little elements behind me. I'm very committed to my city. And it was a city that had a number of challenges, like many major cities. And a lot of my attention went to poverty at first because I saw how different sectors of the city afforded different things to kiddos, right? So I'm in a section of the city that historically looked a certain way. And then you had these uprisings that occurred in the 60s across a lot of the United States. And then that started to change who lived where. And so the folks that were now living by me once could have had these services, but now they're not available to the people that look like us. So the very long story short is I was thinking, all right, residential segregation, poverty, all of these elements that are really important to how cities function. But as I got more into psychology, the question was, why is it that we would allow people to live in different ways? Why would people be under resourced intentionally? Why would we have these dividing lines in cities, or in the case of Detroit, when you have a straight up wall that divides people on one side of 8 Mile with another side of 8 Mile? That's a very real thing that occurred. So that all boiled down to racism. Um, and I couldn't avoid it. I kept trying to think of different things that contributed to these outcomes. But at the end of the day, race and racism, the way that we actually employ our beliefs on race, started to
Mhm.
come out of these questions that I would ask of the why would a city look like this? Why would a family operate like this? It was because of race and racism. So that's what led me to this point. My upbringing, my questions about the lived environment that I was in, and the answers that I kept getting when I was seeking research on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's no, a lot of your work now really focuses on this racial discrimination. And it's interesting how it started from geography. Um, so, with that being said, this has a huge toll on the emotional well being of Black youth. in your view, how does this kind of chronic stress and discrimination, especially in geography, affect a young person's ability to develop emotional intelligence?
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely get to that question. I think it is really important, especially with the world that we're living in right now, to acknowledge that there are strengths and challenges and stressors that come along with cultural capital. So it's one thing to say, I'm living in a space that had intentional resource deprivation, where there weren't enough libraries, hospitals, schools, or the quality of those places were not up to par with folks a mile away, or again, like literally crossing a mile marker from 8 Mile on the north side to 8 Mile on the south side, having incredibly different resources. So it's one thing to talk about how the stress from that environment impacts young people, their family, their lived experience. But it's another to talk about what happened in those same homes, neighborhoods, communities that said, if we only have 15 cents, we're going to make it stretch in this way. If we don't have all of the things in our own house, what neighbor has it, so that we can team up to make sure that those things are afforded. So I always want to acknowledge the both and there, the stressors and the strengths that come from that deprivation and that intentional deprivation. I think that's also really important to say. But notwithstanding those strengths, the stressors are real and they do need to be thought about. And as a clinical psychologist, I do often think about the challenges and the problems that folks face, so that we can try to solve them and come up with these creative solutions. So we certainly know that racism and racial discrimination for Black youth is prevalent to the tune of about 90%. You'll get at least 9 out of 10 young people saying that they've experienced it. And some of the more common occurrences these days look at the frequency even within a certain day. So young people are saying 5+ incidents a day or more are being experienced because of what social media or different forms of communication have allowed our young people to see. And this could be something blatant, so something that is what we might imagine discrimination looking like, someone being called a name, someone being taunted, someone being deprived from an opportunity that their peer has, or it could be something that they're seeing, which is vicarious. So they're watching a Trayvon Martin, they're watching a George Floyd moment happen on their phones or on TV. And that actually is more detrimental, studies indicate, than it happening to you directly. So your brain is just trying to make sense of this experience that did not happen to you. So it's actually more detrimental for young people. And those things, when we're trying to make sense of what happened to us or to those around us, can lead to depression, anxiety, PTSD, and now, unfortunately, suicide has been a trend that our young people have started experiencing in the past decade or so, that also ticks up with what they're experiencing in online spaces. So for Black young people, these outcomes are real and can be life changing and altering.
Right. I think what you said earlier about, I mean, talking about when you're living in communities where you really have to stretch like 15 cents or $1, how unifying that can be sometimes. So I'm happy that you mentioned that, because community just differs across every city. But a lot of times I think in sort of communities that need to band together financially, it's fascinating to see, especially with I have a little bit of experience with this within Latino cultures too. Especially, living in Highland Park in the early aughts, and how communities really can band together and with resources, and how that can help with emotional intelligence, because even though there is this scarcity, there is this opportunity for banding with community, which really has so many positives.
Yeah.
And I think with communities that maybe are more well off, you don't necessarily need to band with your neighbors because you're hyper individualistic, and there are pros to that and there are cons to that, It's a very nuanced thing. What was another thing that you said? You also mentioned, I thought this was interesting. It's more detrimental for students to see travesties happening on their phone than happening to them personally. Can you talk more about that, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. So to be clear, when we talk about vicarious discrimination, it doesn't have to just be online, right? So it's that it's not happening to you is what in comparison to if it is happening to you is the defining marker of what leads to more symptoms of depression, anxiety, etc. We do know, however, that a lot of young people are seeing these things on their phone. So it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it is to say that if it's not happening to you, however, it is coming into your knowledge. And for a lot of young people, because they don't even turn on TVs anymore, it is a phone or a tablet. Um, that is contributing to these severe symptoms. I haven't seen really good explanations as to why, but if I had to speculate a bit, it's that it's more ubiquitous for young people than it used to be if it was we're watching this event happen on a TV as a family that we can all debrief years ago. And it's the regularity that something like that would be both captured and then shown was much more infrequent than now, where it is everywhere all at once. It's everything everywhere all at once. It's all of it, and you're not necessarily with someone who you can process it with. So it's leaving young people to their own devices, and that means their mind is probably trying to create and make sense of what's happening at a much more frequent pace than in the past.
Man, that seems harsh. Everyone gathers around the TV for information, and now you just have your TV and your phone.
That's right.
It's like it's super isolating, even though it was made to connect. How funny is that?
That is something, right?
Yeah. So you've written and spoken extensively about, as we are now, racial stress and trauma. How do you define racial healing, and what does that process look like for you and in your work and emotionally?
Such a great question. I love that. It's really going back to what I was saying before, like what are those strengths that we have been able to cultivate over time to ensure that our young people are getting their needs met no matter what's going on in the rest of the world? I think that's an important part to lean into. And I'll give a very quick example of some of the work that I'm currently engaging in. So I'm writing a book on reparations and looking at what some families were doing in the 17 and 1800s with their young people. And you've mentioned the word socialization in my intro, and I'll give just a quick snippet since that is what cultural healing, one of the elements of cultural healing that I focus on the most. So socialization is something that we do with our kiddos all the time. Look left and right when you're crossing the street. Don't touch the iron. It may be hot. So we're teaching our young people norms and values and beliefs all around us all the time. And that might be the case for someone generally. It could be specific. So academically, that's another big form of socialization. So you're going to get on the bus tomorrow to go to school. We have to pack you a lunch. There's going to be a teacher. There's going to be classmates. So you have to teach your young people what it's going to look like in the world around them to prepare them for that thing. We're all familiar with different forms of socialization. But racial socialization in particular is how we help young people make sense of race and racism, morals, and values. And whether you think that you're doing it or not, this is the kicker, you're doing it, right? So if you're explicitly talking about it, you are giving young people strategies that you think might be good. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, but we'll get back to that in a second. But there are some families who think if we don't talk about it at all, racism won't be an issue for our young people. And your young people are picking up either that race isn't a concern, isn't a problem, or racism rather isn't a concern or a problem, or they're picking up from their phones, the TV, other people around them, what it is that they're talking about. So young people are learning constantly, and it's just a matter of how we want to talk to our young people about it. All right, so that's the backdrop. So 1800s, I'm reading quotes that families are sharing with young people about how to stay safe in these plantation environments, often when they're going to be sold away from their family, or when the person enslaving them is going to hit them or is hitting other people. And so it's this question of how do you survive in this newfound society that's very different from what our family has had to navigate in the past. But this is what I've picked up as an adult. So I'm trying to pass it along to you as a kiddo to be safe, happy, healthy, whole. And that process, 200 some odd years, still exists much in the same way that it did in the 17 and 1800s. And I was blown away to see some of the exact phrases that our families use today be used in arguably supposed to be a very different context, a very different space, but that cultural healing practice of how do we attend to the wounds or the potential harms that our young people are facing with this knowledge, with this passing down of strategy, of preparation, of safety. That's one of the biggest forms of cultural healing that I practice and that I spend my time with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that must be overwhelming seeing that pattern of we're still using the same jargon we've used hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel when you're passing down this information, it's important to recognize that that pattern exists and talk about that with kiddos as you're talking about, or older adolescents, your peers, and being like, this needs to be, is that a sense of healing for young people as well, is to sort of recognize this pattern?
Yeah, I mean, this is really new. I'm not saying I'm the first psychologist that's ever made this association, but a lot of psychological literature goes back 30 or 40 years on this concept. And so we've only had maybe two generations of study where we're seeing what families are saying to each other. Maybe you can ask about what grandparents have said. So we don't have much beyond three generations of this pattern developing. So it's a great question that you're asking, because I am going to start to think about how do I bring that history and that multi-generational element into the work that I'm doing with young people. But more so, what is it that my team is doing that's helping this construct to evolve? If healing has to look different in 2025 relative to 1825, what is it that we're trying to do differently? And that gets into a lot of what you're talking about here with your audience, which is there are emotions, there are reasons, there are strategies that undergird why we're doing this. So I'm not just going to tell you when you see a police officer, put your hands on the wheel. That's oftentimes what we might say to a young person today. Or when an authority figure, whether in the 1800s that was an enslaver, or in the 2000s that is a teacher, that's a police officer, etc. If they are harassing you, if they're saying something to you, then you just say yes sir, no sir. Like that, it's one thing to just declare it. It's another to say you must feel like you don't have the agency or the ability to talk to the people saying this stuff to you in a way that you would want to say. How does that make you feel when you're really unpacking that and allowing people to speak about their agency, their existence, their resistance? That's where I'm hoping to evolve this construct so that we can get into the talk in ways that moves us to the next century rather than relies on what we've been doing for the past two.
Right. So with that being said, a lot of our listeners are leaders, and they are trying to support a group of people, and for a specific outcome, whether it be in their business or in their school or even in their immediate home. how do you train or support leaders, whether, again, therapists, educators, policymakers, to recognize and respond to racial stress in ways that are effective and grounded in solid evidence?
Yeah. The first thing that I always encourage folks to think about is to make space for racial stress and trauma to be something that is focused on in these spaces. So I want to name very clearly that in the United States right now, that can be a risk for some people, that bringing up race and racism in schools, in after school programs, in the sciences, like it is a risk. At the same time, as a scientist, as someone who studies this and is not a quote DEI initiative, it is an empirically supported scientific phenomena that I study and have spent my entire life understanding that discrimination leads to negative psychological outcomes for young people, and that racial stress and trauma that's experienced in discrimination can be mitigated if we talk about it. Full stop. That's what the science is. So if people are trying to figure out what they can do, the first step is making space for that racial stress and trauma to be discussed. That might be something like, especially if you're in school spaces, just asking what's on the news, what happened this weekend that's really impacting you. Now, if you haven't really made space for this in the past, it may not be the first thing that a young person says to you. I'm a researcher that spends a lot of time talking about it. And if you ask a young person, have you experienced discrimination? Sometimes they say no. But then if you give examples and you say, like, if there's a hoodie up in the grocery store, do they ask you to take it down? Or does someone follow you when you're in a expensive place? Like what, if you give them examples of things like you and I just talked about when we hopped on, there's a lot going on in Los Angeles right now. People are standing up for their rights. Is that something that has been bothering you when you watch that on the news? Giving people examples so that they know, oh, actually, yeah, that is something that frustrates me or bothers me, can be a way to let them know, A, you're listening, but B, can also give them the language to norm what they're feeling, what that experience is in that space. So that's number one, give space for that. Once inevitably somebody says, yeah, that is a troublesome thing for me, make space to talk about it. How does that make you feel? What are the types of things that you would like to be able to do about it? Write a letter. If they're saying, I want to make a policy change on this, contact the city council. Let that be a part of your leadership lesson for them. What would it be like to advocate for yourself at the city council level, or to write curriculum at your school and have the young people involved in that? So young people know how they want to make change. They're very good, actually, at coming up with amazing opportunities to make those changes. So have them be involved. That will boost their agency. That will boost their sense of competency in doing something about this race and racism. And it can only happen if that space is afforded in your schools, in your curriculum, in your practice.
Yeah, you're right in saying that bringing up racial stressors can be a risk, because you don't want to necessarily rock the boat, but in not doing so, it can have detrimental consequences, and I think that's really important for our leaders to understand. Also, maybe if you do feel uncomfortable bringing up these things, community, you don't have to go through this alone. You can talk to people, you can talk to psychologists, you can talk to very learned people and ask, what can I do to make sure this is not uncomfortable for me, but also
Yes.
not, I am strong enough to create a space where my peers and my students and my coworkers feel safe, because creating that safe space is a skill set, and that you're not just born with it, so don't feel hard on yourself for not being able to feel like you have that skill right now. It's a learned skill.
I really want to jump in on that, because you're naming exactly what I tell adults all the time, particularly parents who I work with, that the vast majority of folks who don't talk to their kiddos about race is because of their own fears, their own concerns around it. you can practice with yourself. So you can take time looking in the mirror and engage in this work. You can practice with your colleagues, with your loved ones, a supportive other, but you have to first break down that barrier to be able to talk to young people. So I really just want to thank you for saying that. And the other thing very quickly is, okay, maybe you know good and got doggone well that the funding from your school is going to get pulled if you do something that courageous or brave, right? Exactly like you said, you call me, I will do a workshop with the kiddos after school. I'll do it with them so that when they're at home, they could listen to me and you're totally absolved of it. They can use a QR code that I developed, but that teamwork, that sense of we all have skills, we all have a reason and a purpose that we're here today. And your skill might be finding the people that can then engage the young people rather than being the one delivering it because you know the risk might be so great. But don't let that fear of not being able to deliver it yourself because you have that block, or that you're that a real risk might be true. Don't let that fear stop the process.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these topics are going to come up no matter what you do.
That's right.
You know, so might as well direct your loved ones, your peers, your associates in the right direction.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
so, you know, you're going to open up your phone and you're going to see something, and
That's right.
their own biology to pick up certain things, but it's also, I think, important for your community members to be like, well, let's sort of help guide you so you're not attaching yourself only to the negative things.
That's right.
You know, because that can be a very slippery slope if you don't have the background, maybe the best moral compass, maybe, you know, and it's important for people around you to support you. And maybe it happens very subconsciously too, you know.
That's right.
So I want to talk a little bit about Embrace, short for Engaging, Managing, and Bonding Through Race. It's your family-based intervention designed to help Black families navigate stress and strengthen their relationships. I'd love to hear obviously about this and starting this, and if you can share a few techniques or takeaways from the program that might help I know you just talked about creating space, but within this program, anything that our listeners can take away from that or what you've learned. It's such a vast program.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we started this in Philly with a school, going in and working with families and clinicians so that young people had a space to unpack some of these racial stressors that they were encountering. And so we spend time training therapists first, again, to do exactly what we were just talking about, to have enough agency and competency for themselves to talk about these issues with other people, right? Because just because you're a licensed anything or an educator or a leader, right, it doesn't mean that you're born, as you've said beautifully, with that skill. So it does take practice, even for licensed or trainees of mental health programs. So we first start with training our therapists, and then we move into working directly with families. We give parents their space, we give kiddos their space first. So we're letting parents just be adults, just be humans, just unpack some of the stuff that they haven't talked about in 25 plus years to anyone ever in life. And then we have young people who say, well, I don't actually want to tell my mom because of this experience, or the same classroom that like the teacher has said some troubling things to me, and it's the same classroom we're doing this intervention in. So then we got to unpack all of that. It was so much that we just needed to give individuals their space to talk about first before bringing them together and asking them as a dyad, asking the therapist as the triad, like to think through how to have these conversations. So that was the method by which we did that. Some of the outcomes were exactly what we had hoped for. So Embrace, again, stands for engaging, managing, and bonding. Engaging is how we have the conversation. Managing is the stress management component, and bonding is the family relational piece. So all of the things that we hypothesized that we would have better competency to talk about race and racism checked out, that we could reduce our stress, that checked out, and that our family would have better relationships at the end of this, that all checked out. So our hypotheses were supported. And the way that we talk about competency, the thing to take away from, well, how on earth do we talk about race better? The three elements of competency are stress, skills, and confidence. And we've talked about all of these already today. So when we talk about stress, how do we reduce stress? You can breathe. You can spend some time noticing your breath and your anger as you're watching something, your sadness as you're watching something, and you're processing that for yourself or your loved ones. So what does it look like to be in a space where you just finished watching the murder of someone on national television, and now you have a young one looking at you asking, why are you so upset about it? Have you taken the time to actually do some of your own stress reduction before launching into talking to this child? And it doesn't mean that you have to be clear-headed. Those tears can mean something, that anger can mean something, but have you taken just a breath to be able to talk about what those tears or that anger means for you, or that neutrality, you feeling so. I remember watching the video of Philando Castile and just being incapable of having emotion or thought. I was so numb in that moment. Like, have you taken that breath to be able to say, why is it that I'm feeling this in this moment? What do I need to talk about or say or do? So that's the stress. The skills piece. A lot of people think that they have to have all of the answers for themselves, that they were born with a blueprint, with a manual ready to go. That's not the case for anything that we do. So why would it be the case with race or racism? And so what are you finding that exists? What repositories are you going to that are going to help you walk through some of these things to talk about? Is it a TV show? Is it a podcast? Is it half the things that I've been on boards for? So like Nickelodeon, PBS, YouTube, Google, all of these places that I have served as an advisor on have created these resources that you can go to websites, click on links, and follow step by step. So these things exist, and a lot of people have put a lot of time into creating these repositories. So those are skills that you can develop by grabbing content that already exists to have these conversations and practicing it. Finally, that confidence also goes into the practice element. Go to a mirror, go to a loved one, go to someone, and just get it out of your mouth. That fear is going to hold you back. Open your mouth. You might be wrong, but the best part about working with young people is that if you start by saying, listen, I don't have all the answers, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you that space, that we can talk about this. I might be wrong, and I will come back to you tomorrow and let you know if I am. But right now, let's give it a go. They have a lot of grace. They have a lot of love for you. They have a lot of know-how. So they're going to be able to contribute again to this conversation.
I love this 3-tier. It's very palatable in the sense that it's not, or accessible, you have the 3-tier stress, was it stress, strength, and confidence?
Pretty darn close. And I like that better. I might steal that, but stress, skills, and confidence. Yeah.
Skills. Yeah. But when you were talking about this, I was like, over time, this becomes a strength of yours. It might not be so sturdy in the beginning. But
that's right.
Over time, I think this becomes a real strength,
That's right.
So how does race space fit into all of this? Because you're the founder and CEO, and it sounds very similar to what we're talking about right now, which,
that's right.
Where it creates this space for reflection, healing, and growth around race and identity. Can you tell us a bit about that vision behind race space and just, I guess, how it connects to Embrace in your community and how it, complements your work and how it's differentiated?
I think the biggest contribution that race space made was just listening to the needs of young people during the pandemic and asking, what do you want? What are we missing? And they told us there are all of these things that are happening for adults. Where's our stuff? Like, how come people aren't talking to us about these things? They're talking to everybody around us, but where's our stuff? And so we asked, what would that look like for you? And they're like, we'll use something on our phone. We'll check out what's going on. And so we developed Race Space to have technology that we're using for young people to be able to access some of these lessons that we just talked about with Embrace, or what my colleagues have developed in their own labs that are complementary to Embrace. How could we have a standalone product that could help young people to navigate this space on race? So we developed an app called Teens Navigating the Talk with adolescents in our focus groups. The goal is for it to be a free tool for young people to be able to use. We're piloting it now. We're testing it to make sure that it is doing what we're asking it to do. But that's really, it was a responsive tool that we thought was important for young people to have access to in times of trouble. And again, kind of bringing it back to my flippant nature with respect to the time that we're in right now. Like, you can use this tool. Like, we can get this tool in your school, in your after school space for young people, so that you can say, well, we weren't the ones teaching them about it. We weren't the ones talking about it. It was me and my face on their phones. That's how they get knowledge. So it was always about, in times of trouble, how can we have stuff that young people can use for free by themselves?
Yeah, I love that. So it's like the skills section of Embrace. And you said it's called Teens Navigating the Talk, and it's in its sort of like beta stages right now? Or?
Yeah, yep. So TNT, we've gone through alpha testing, it's in beta testing, and it's taken a little longer than we had hoped, but such is life, that things take time, but hopefully it'll be ready when it needs to launch for young people right now.
That's amazing. And a very valuable resource, in our company, we're always trying to find ways to allow AI and technology to support emotional growth. That's right. Even though, as I was saying in the beginning, sometimes it could be incredibly isolating. So with that being said, kind of shifting gears, what are your thoughts on technology and the role digital platforms have in this sort of emotional intelligence and healing? And I know it's maybe don't be on your phone as much, or have when we were talking, I was like, that'd be so cool if we just had community spaces where there were phones, and it allowed you to not be on your phone individually, which is so crazy. But like, how can you open up your sort of digital experience to community? And these are thoughts that I have, so we don't feel isolated in our emotions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a double-edged sword, right? Like, it's tough because of all the things you've already said so beautifully, that technology has created loneliness, division, isolation. It's a tool that was originally bringing people closer together, and now its over-reliance and its over-dependence can contribute to some really gnarly psychological effects. At the same time, when people find their community thousands of miles away and they're like, oh, I had that experience, or oh, I resonate with that, that's such a beautiful thing that we weren't able to do 20 years ago. Or I will acknowledge that AI feels a bit out of my league in terms of talking about it in a real way, but what digital platforms can allow us to do, of bringing young people together and being in community with each other miles and miles away. We're hoping at some point that our platform will allow for these types of digital and community spaces, but we've also created VR programs. We've allowed young people to use storyboarding as a way to express themselves on what they would want to do when they face racism. So it's a tool that can help young people to express or to come together. It doesn't have to be this dividing feature. I think we see it as this monster, this behemoth, but really it is just a tool. So what does the tool allow us to do that is for good? And let's lean into that a bit more than the challenge, which again, one of the reasons we even made TNT or with Race Based the app is because we saw what could happen if young people were on their phones all day in these really negative environments. But at the same time, we believe technology can be used for good. So I just want to acknowledge that it could be both and.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also important too, to now that you're talking about it, and even with my own relationship with social media, is it triggers you in a way, and it also puts a mirror in front of you. Like, how are you going to deal with these triggers? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit in, sort of cyclone, sadness and anger, or are you going to put your phone away and go for a jog, and learn from those lessons? So I think it's important also. It's like it's like this whole Buddhist thing where, you can't sit in a cave and just expect like, oh, you're perfect. You have to go out and sort of like experience friction to understand who you are and to understand if you've learned those sort of lessons, So I think digital spaces can be very illuminating to your character too.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of our last questions, with which we like to close out with all of our guests, is a lot of our speakers and guests are in high emotional sort of fields, or deal with emotionally intense and complex issues. What's something you consistently return to, whether it's a habit, routine, or mindset that helps you stay balanced and focused in the midst of it?
Chocolate is a big one. There's like if you open my fridge at this point, it's really ridiculous. There's probably 8 full-size bars of chocolate from different places that people have given me. And I know I have to eat them at some point, but they're just so great. They look so cute. So I just kind of keep them there. But I'd love a good treat. I love a good chocolate. I also do very intense working out. So I box, I do hot yoga, stuff that people hate. And it just gives me space to get it all out, get all the stuff that is really tough out. I like to, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. Something that I picked up when I was doing my dissertation was like these moments to breathe a bit, which can be like Key and Peele 5-minute sketches on YouTube. And so like when I'm writing and I'm like, okay, this is heavy, or I just got out of something that was pretty tough, I just go to YouTube, I find a hilarious quick sketch and I laugh my tush off, and then I get right back to it. So that chocolate, activity, and laughter are the 3 things I would recommend.
Yes, I love that. I think I read on your bio, cake pops is a
Cake
big
pops. That is correct.
for you.
Yes. Yes. I recently did a event for a group, and they gave me a little gift bag, and I opened it up and it was 3 cake pops, and I was like, you don't understand how much currency you just bought yourself. Like, you can use me now for 3-4 more times before I'm looking again for those cake pops. But like, you listened, and you know, that mattered. So like, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Yeah, like listening. This is my love language. Cake pops.
Yes. Yeah, very much.
Also, I love Key and Peele. I truly love. I used to do the same. I'm like, oh, I should do it again. Actually, just need that like 5-6 minute hilarious sketch of Key and Peele. The cell phone one is so funny to me, where they're like, he's like saying something nice and he texts it to, he's like, what? He's like getting angry about something.
Yes.
Like totally calculating the tone. It's so
absolutely
funny.
That one's good. I also highly recommend Boarding Zone 1. It's a sleeper. Not everyone knows about this one, but Boarding Zone 1 is just top. If you travel a lot, you will appreciate it so much. Yes.
All right. I want to say thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insight and your research and your amazing leadership with us. I really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you so much. Can I leave one more word with our beautiful humans?
Yes.
Yes. So I mentioned the word courage earlier, and just remember at the very base of it is heart. It's love. It's like COUR, right? So it takes a lot of heart to do what you're doing already, being a leader out in the world. And right now, the courage that we need is going to take that love for our young people. So remember that you have it and you have it to share. It's within you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
If you found today's conversations meaningful, as I did, we encourage you to dig deeper into Dr. Anderson's work, especially the Embrace intervention and her ongoing efforts with Race Space Inc. Check out TNT, Teens Navigating the Talk. That was really exciting. I'm really excited to see where that goes and to download it. And we'll link all of that onto our website at www.civiltalk.com. Check out Boarding Zone 1. We'll link that too. Why not? And as always, we hope today's conversation leaves you thinking more critically and feeling more equipped and inspired to lead with intention and empathy. And as Dr. Riana Elyse Anderson mentioned, with heart. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who you think could benefit. And as always, stay kind. Thank you.